Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Jess Spiro, Head of Content here at Simple, and on behalf of our team, thank you so much for tuning in today. For those who don't know, Simple is a knowledge, data, and access provider to the next generation of family offices, and today we're looking ahead to 2023's key megatrends and distilling them through a family office lens to discuss what family offices should be thinking about in the coming year. Leading our discussion today is Simple's own Simon Lockett. Simon is our US Business Director who leads Simple's expansion within the US and brings with him extensive family office experience. Joining Simon today is our panel made up of expert advisors in and around the family office space. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Minuzzi, CEO and founder of UMANA Family Office, Liza Chong, CEO of the Index Project, Elliot Hughes, a Senior Government Relations and Public Affairs Advisor, and our very own Francois Boita, founder and CEO of Simple. Hello, panelists. We are thrilled to have you join us today. You each bring with you such interesting and diverse expertise, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say today. Before I leave you, I'd like to invite everyone listening in to send in any questions throughout the discussion. We'll keep an eye on them and make sure that they're answered. That's everything from me. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome Francois to the spotlight. Over to you, Francois.
Thanks, Jess, for the intro. And from my side as well, welcome to everyone in the Simple community joining us today. And for those who might be joining us for the first time today, I'm Francois. I am the founder and CEO here at Simple, and I'm coming at you from a very cool and grey Copenhagen. So to start off this year's webinars, I'd like to provide some context to kind of the idea and the concept of foresight, which is the focus of today's discussion. We believe this discussion is quite a relevant one, especially as we're right now in the middle of this proverbial snowstorm, and it's hard to see what lies ahead. So when you first hear the list of topics that we're diving into, it might sound like a very random selection. However, with this context, it hopefully looks a little bit less than like a fruit salad. Every year when we start work on our annual piece where we look forward to the year ahead, we collaborate with our foresight partners and we use a framework which is called the STEEP V framework. STEEP V stands for social, technological, economic, environmental, political, and values. And these are the external factors that influence the trends in allowing foresight practitioners to look for signals in the noise in order to analyze the past and create scenarios for the future. So because of a lot of the work that we do at Simple is to break down complex ideas into shareable and actionable knowledge, the aim for today's discussion is to step out of these theoretical frameworks and make things a little bit more practical. So I'm super happy for these friends of Simple joining us on this discussion today. On that note, Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Francois. Thanks, Jess. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to our first webinar for the year and to introduce you to our special guests in just a few moments. So the purpose of today's webinar is to take a deeper look at what the year ahead could look like for family offices around the world. And we are enriching this conversation with contrasting perspectives or lenses from a thoughtful selection of industry innovators. In the spirit of open and transparent communication, we encourage you, our audience, to add your questions in real time. So to submit questions via LinkedIn, utilize the comment section. And if you're listening via the Simple platform, please submit questions to the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner. And we'll keep an eye on these throughout the webinar and try our very best to answer them in real time. To get us started, I'm kindly requesting that our panelists introduce themselves. So providing their who, what, why, where, and how. So Bar, perhaps let's start with you and we can work our way around the horn. So please tell us who you are, including your position and the company you work for, what problem you're solving and why it's important, where you and your clients are located, and then finally, how you solve problems, and ultimately, how do you determine your metrics for impact and for success? Bar?
Hey, pleasure to be here today. Very humbling to be with such an amazing group of experts and different perspectives. So excited for this conversation, and I hope who is attending is also excited. To tell about myself, I'm Minuzzi. I'm based in Los Angeles. So I'm the founder and CEO of UMANA, a multifamily office that work with influential voices, as we call, meaning celebrities, athletes, people of influence. And the problem we're solving is that we believe there is like a disconnection between money and meaning, like that people think wealth and money are the same thing, and we don't. And what we believe is if we help people who have true influence, and by influence we mean offline, but also online, millions of followers, and they leverage that platform to educate their audiences to be part of positive change, we can change things for the better. So the core of everything we do is educating them about their values, like helping them understanding their values, showing them sustainable development goals, like learning about their causes and how they can be of support on those things. And then what else? How we do it? It's surely about listening to them. Like we spend a lot of time first understanding what are their values in order to achieve like our mission, which is redefining wealth. So understanding that money is separate to true wealth, financial wealth is only one pillar, and then we work towards that. And how we measure, some people hate it, some people love it. Our family members, of course, love it. But the first thing, the way we measure is their level of joy. The reason for that is we believe people need to first work on themselves before try to change the world, you know? So first we need to truly make them understand where are their weaknesses, why their financial wealth is not aligned with what they want to see in the world, and blah, blah, blah. And then they show up to help others. So their level of joy does changes from time to time, because the more you evolve, more pain you go through, you know, it's tough. So some people who are very concrete, especially in our industry, they don't like it because it's very hard to pin it down, like what is working, what's not. And then, but that's what we love. That's what we really think we do greatly. And then there's the more tangible way, which is really like leveraging sustainable development goals, like learning what type of impact we want. And that can be through the impact investing side, through charitable giving, whatever it is. It's very data driven. And I think that's also why we differentiate. We are not just the woo-woo, you know, like we do that pretty well. And then we can be very grounded. But that's awesome. It in a nutshell.
Thanks, Bar. Appreciate that. Elliot, on to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Simon and Francois, and great to be in front of you all. Elliot Hughes, political consultant and commentator and strategic advisor. And, you know, the clients that we work with and the problems that we help solve can range from sort of very small to quite large. I try to help them understand, you know, political events, economic and geopolitical events, and then how those events will influence primarily government decision making, but sometimes other stakeholders as well, and what potential responses those clients should consider based on those decisions. And then for whom, I mean, as I said, small, large clients and everything in between. We've defense clients, obviously, unfortunately, is sort of booming in some ways because of what's happening globally. You've got the tech clients as well, which has been a pretty big roller coaster as of late with some of the job losses, but also some very interesting activity happening in the tech space with OpenAI and ChatGPT and Wall-E and so on. So some interesting times in the tech space, and hope to talk about that a little bit later. And then also in global health, which is also going through some challenges through the impacts of the war in Ukraine, changing environment and climate. And then essentially how we help sort of those clients and how I help those clients solve some of these challenges is really through intelligence gathering, in talking to sources both within government, outside of government, experts, and so on. And then analyzing that piece and then developing that strategy that sits behind that. And that's all informed by my experience working for a G7 finance minister and defense minister. And so I try to bring that perspective of how governments think about policy making. And then ultimately how we measure. Always a challenge, as Bob mentioned, but for us, it's things like whether or not a decision is made around big procurement, so defense procurement. Whether a direction on a certain policy initiative goes one way or another, or in some cases, for example, in the clean tech or critical mines, whether a government decides to invest in a company and so on. So that's a bit of a summary of how I'm approaching today's discussion, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Awesome, thanks, Elliot. And then Liza, on to you.
Hi, yes, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Liza Chong. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit foundation called the Index Project. We're based here in Copenhagen, in Denmark. So the problem that we're solving, first and foremost, I'm very passionate about design and innovation. And our organization is very driven by, you could say, a philosophy called design to improve life. So it's not just looking at design as just beautiful objects and aesthetics, but how can the power of design be used to actually really change the world? And what we do is we like to highlight concrete cases of how design and innovation are really tackling some of the wicked problems that we see in the world. And of course, highlighted by the UN SDGs, but also looking on the horizon in terms of other emergent challenges that don't fit neatly into that grid. So for us, it's really about being solutions focused. So how do we actually see all real needs being addressed by designers and innovators, and how those problems are being solved and contextualized, and in effect, how do we learn from that? How do we ensure that these ideas come to scale so they're not just great ideas, brilliant concepts, but actually how do we get the rocket fuel behind some of these ideas? How we do that is threefold. So storytelling and inspiring people to see how tangible these ideas can be. So I think the power of storytelling is really important. And we do that through an Index Awards, which is a biennial design award, which is focused on sourcing ideas from all over the world. And we basically share those stories, get people really excited about how you can clean water through a portable plastic straw, for instance, or how you could actually create moonshot innovations that are actually going to really, really tackle the energy crisis. So everything from things that are super practical right through to larger moonshot ideas, which seem really far-fetched and future forward. Second of all, we mobilize capital. So through the power of our networks, we try to bring together not just wealth holders, but also corporates, VCs, to actually invest into some of the most interesting and exciting investment opportunities that come through the Index Awards. And thirdly, we have education programs. So for us, it's also important that we're training up the next generation that are thinking critically about the future, but also have the tools and the capabilities to actually create, build, and in effect, address some of the emergent challenges that we see on the horizon. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what we do, and how we measure, of course, that there's we try to simplify, and of course it is difficult to really boil down the type of impact that we're looking for, but we take it from a three-pronged approach. We believe the form is very important, so how tangible products or services are, what they look like, how does a user and how is it responding to specific needs of people. So I think that's really important, looking the look and feel and touch. The context, so where the solutions are going to be used and how they're going to improve people's life in that situation in that context. I think that's important. Solutions that are designed in India may not necessarily translate very well in North America and vice versa. And finally, impact. So of course, harder to measure, but of course we have to speculate what the probable impact a solution might have. So that's a little bit of the engine room of how we evaluate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and such a wonderful set of contrasting perspectives and expertise. So welcome, and let's dive in. I think we can all agree that 2022 was a year of continued volatility on multiple fronts. In Simple's 2023 Signals Review, we identified and analyzed the forces shaping our world this coming year through a family office lens. In it, we flagged 4 key megatrends that will frame our agenda for discussion today. The megatrends our team identified are: 1, a volatile political and economic context; 2, the escalating climate crisis; 3, an increasing decentralized tech landscape; and 4, a new or revised set of values. So let's start by examining the volatile political and economic context. The global political arena faces pressures in 2023 from continued shifts in the balance of power between states. A ceasefire or formal peace agreement seems a long way off in Ukraine. In the case of the United States and China, while tensions may increase, they remain conscribed to the economic realm with equal parts interdependence and contest. Elliot, utilizing your geopolitical perspective and expertise, what strategies can family offices use to make sense of and weather these volatile political storms?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not a very cheery section to kick off, but we will do our best. As you say, Simon, I mean, this is a difficult year. What was in 22, and unfortunately, I think 23 isn't shaping up to be sort of much better. So just to sort of ground ourselves a little bit before jumping into the strategy piece, I mean, we've got economic challenges, so sort of inflation, cost of living, interest rate rising. We've got the longer term challenges like climate change, which we see in sort of changing temperatures and weather patterns and shifts in agricultural trends and so on. And then we still have these seemingly perpetual black clouds that don't seem to want to go away. COVID, unfortunately, still remains a very real thing in many parts of the world. And with China opening up, and with this new Kraken variant, I mean, I think there's some risk there that will come back in some force in 23. And then you've obviously got the war in Ukraine. And so this very complex and sort of state of affairs, a sort of time of polycrisis, makes it very difficult for families, for businesses to make investment decisions because it's a much more complex landscape. The number of factors for consideration are increasing and very high, and that level of uncertainty makes ultimately making a decision quite difficult. And then just the final piece here, you couple that with some of the bigger sort of trends that are going on too. I mentioned climate change, but we're coming to the close of what I think a lot of people would call the information age, and sort of starting to tip into a new age, a digital age, an AI age, a quantum computing age. We've got demographic challenges sort of knocking at our door as well. And so this rebalancing and reglobalization that's taking place and some new alliances emerging, again, sort of cloud things even more. So turning to your specific question, Simon, I would say, look, I'm generally a pretty conservative guy. So I would say for those who are conservative, more long-term in their vision, now is probably the time to sit back, see how things unfold, because I think there's going to be a lot of turmoil over the next couple of months and potentially the year. But if you are a little bit more adventurous, you have a higher risk tolerance, and it's something that you're okay sort of investing when there's, to use a tough term, blood in the streets, now is the time for you to kind of get involved and take advantage of some potential opportunities out there. But it is a trying time. And I think, as I said, it's not super fun, but hopefully there are some folks who can perhaps find some new rays of light in 23.
Thanks, Elliot. And while we have you on this topic, what makes this present period of economic uncertainty different from the 1970s stagflation?
Well, I think it is different in some ways, but it's actually quite similar, isn't it? It was a time of great change. I think there was a new age, that sort of that digital age, or the information age, I should say, was just starting. It was a time of great power competition, another thing that we see now. Challenging economic times, as you mentioned, the stagflation piece, which again we see happening, not necessarily stagflation today, but certainly challenging economic times. And there was a sense of change afoot, and on the edge of something new. But when you're in that time, it's a bit destabilizing potentially, and I think that sort of scares people, and creates, in some cases, opportunities, but also increases risk. In terms of how different it is, I think look, we need to be careful about stagflation, and I'm obviously something you need to be concerned about at all times, but particularly now. I think if you look to what happened politically in the economy in the UK late last year, where there were some challenges that the markets saw with where the politics was going, and sort of reacted. We certainly can't put that into the corner and forget about it. That said, I think we are in a bit of a better place than the 1970s. We're a bit wiser in that case. But we do need to watch what's happening in developing countries. We are still very interconnected, globalized, and what happens in China, what happens in the South, the global South, will impact us. We've seen that through COVID. It's something that can also happen through geoeconomics and geopolitics. So there are some differences, but certainly some similarities as well.
Nice. But clearly UMANA family offices clients are part of this next generation where they believe making ethically conscious investments can also offer financial benefits. Can you share with us your perspective on this, and how can family offices use their influence and capital for good within these complex geopolitical contexts that we just described?
Yes, 100%. Is it cut it a little? Are we all, can you listen to me? Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so you're back. No, but yes, I was saying that's 100% the case. Like, we believe in conscious investing, in ethical investing. So one of our family members, he actually created a term which is yield beyond money for his wealth creation thesis, and I love that. And that's just one example, because when they evolve to that point that they can even like create their own like mission for their wealth, that's great. And like that goes so interesting, because of course he's an actor, so he has like big platform, he has the influence, and then he's talking about yield beyond money. For him, yield beyond money, like his core value. For him, gender equality is very important. So like there are a lot of things, but that's how we see that you can be doing good, you can be leveraging your platform, and you can still get financial returns. So example of yield beyond money, getting financial returns, and achieving the cause of gender equality for him is an investment at Public. It's an investment app. Like more than 50% of the users of that platform are women, are millennial women. Most of them have never invested before. So when we invested in Public, we did find, like back to Liza's point, the design incredible. We love user experience. We need to find investments that are truly appealing to people, and that we can get to the impact without being just what perceive as impact investing, the very traditional green-ish thing, like we go a little differently than what most of impact investors do. But with that, we achieved like the empowerment of women. We believe if women have more financial wealth, things change for the better as well. That's his thesis. And then the yield beyond money, and a lot of community, because most of this platform is about connecting, exchanging ideas, and like learning from each other. What I feel about down markets and times of scarcity is that we bond better. So then back to community, I'm feeling the family offices are way more connected. Like by the end of last year, like Q4, getting together way more often here in LA. Like, let's get lunch, let's discuss, let's exchange ideas, and see how we can help each other, which is lovely. Like if we have that support system, if we're really exchanging ideas, if we're sharing deals, if we're helping, especially on the venture capital side that Elliot mentioned, like it's so challenging for early stage founders at this point, and for every stage actually, especially like post IPO. But like we can be of support, and because like back to your question, because of the influence some of these family offices have and these folks, there's a lot that can be done, but it needs to be done as a group. You know, it's very hard even with all the influence to do things on your own. So what I like about these downtimes is that actually you bond more, you become more creative, and you become more supportive. That's what I'm feeling.
And I think the future is definitely very collaborative, and that's a huge part of why Simple was founded. So thanks for those points. I'm going to shift gears and examine our second mega trend. It's the escalating climate crisis. The long drum beat of increasing urgency of the climate crisis obviously continues in 2023. However, it is yet to unite global powers under the same objective, if not only to prevent a veneer of global solidarity. The need for drastic climate intervention measures is only increasing in 2023, and for investors like family offices, using capital to finance a greener future is both smart and ethically responsible. So Liza, what are important considerations when family offices diligence funds or maybe companies that focus on building green and climate-friendly infrastructure?
Yeah, no, I think to add to Elliot's earlier point around interconnectedness, I think, you know, we can't look at the climate crisis in isolation as if it's there's going to be one single solution that's going to solve it. And I think this will be a continued challenge for years to come until we come together and work collaboratively. And that means, you know, from the political level, but right through to you could say sort of on a social level, like our education systems. And everyone has to be aligned in seeing this as a crisis. And of course, again, with my optimistic hat, I like to take a solutions-focused perspective when it comes to the climate crisis, because I still see opportunities and I still get excited by solutions where I feel there's a sense of hope, because I think, frankly, it doesn't feel very hopeful, not particularly when you're in a dark room in dark northern part of the hemisphere. It feels very gloomy. And I think, again, touching on what Elliot said earlier on, we're still in the pandemic. I think we've kind of created this sort of amnesia that we've just gotten over it, and we haven't actually. And I think we have to sort of take stock of the fact that we're still coming out of a pandemic, still assessing what life actually means to us when we went through this massive existential crisis, and the climate crisis is an existential crisis as well. So everyone needs to be alert to the fact that we have to work together, and we have to do this in a very holistic way. So let's take, for example, you mentioned creating green infrastructures. Well, just to break it down, because of course we can generalize here, but look at the built environment and decarbonizing our built environment. I mean, of course, this is really, it's a very physical, it's a tangible thing. It requires materials, and we are extracting the resources of our earth as if there's no tomorrow. There is simply not enough resources to continue at the pace that we are at. And annual CO2 emissions of approximately 40% in the built environment itself. So of course, we have to look at how we're actually creating our environments, but also look at the solutions and invest heavily in making sure that we aren't continuing down the path of continued extraction. Like I say, I'm optimistic. I see solutions coming through index awards that I get very excited about, and I want more people to get excited about. We had one winner from Index Award in 2021, a London-based startup called Biome. And what they're doing is that they're actually looking at bio-based materials in the construction industry and utilizing the root structure of mushrooms, so mycelium-based materials that can create insulation panels, acoustic panels, and various sorts. And the company now works with over 300 different types of mycelium strains. So, of course, this also means that our building blocks of tomorrow will be very, very different. And we have to think ahead in terms of how we're using our materials And that just requires a shift of gear and the courage to try new things. It also means being much more risky, with maybe sort of failures, a lot of mishaps, but this is all in the experimentation because quite frankly, we don't have enough time. And I think just status quo is frankly not sufficient. So I would urge us to sort of think in terms of our building blocks, in terms of the tools and what's available to us, and just have the responsibility mindset in mind.
Very interesting as well what you're saying there as well, looking to Mother Nature to solve problems. This is definitely happening in the case of medicine. You mentioned mushrooms, psilocybin's being used for the treatment of PTSD in the clinical setting. I mean, it's very interesting going back to nature to solve current problems. I think it's a really interesting perspective. Are there any investment opportunities or risks that you want to flag quickly for us? For I guess, family offices that are looking to finance this green transition?
I think in terms of risks, of course, it is all risky. And especially sort of co-creating with nature, where nature doesn't really have a voice. So we're doing all the thinking and we're doing all the analysis on behalf of something that we simply don't have control over. So I would say we just have to take bolder risks. We have to have the courage to do it. And let's try not to outsmart nature. We've been doing that for over 50 years and look where we've got to. So I really think, we just have to understand that we have all the intelligence. We're creating artificial intelligence now. We can't simply outsmart the environment, the limited resources that we have. We just simply have to do.
Nice. Elliot, do you believe there are ways for families of wealth to support climate change initiatives without getting too political?
I may not be the best, I might not give the best advice in this instance, because my view is, I mean, you've got to just not worry about the political shots you're going to take, frankly. That's my personal view. I think this is too important a topic to not wholeheartedly get involved and back. We don't need, everyone doesn't need to become Greta Thunberg, but we do need to take this very seriously. The other thing I would just quickly say, just conscious of time as well, is the business case for leaning into climate initiatives or climate investments is a very, very powerful one now. It's very good. It's probably the best it's ever been. You've got, particularly in the North American market, the Inflation Reduction Act provides incredible incentives for companies and opportunities for family businesses to take advantage of some of that. And I know the Canadian government is looking very closely at how do they sort of step up to the plate on that as well and provide those similar incentives. So this case, or this sort of business case that you're sort of just doing it because it's the right thing to do and it feels good, I think is no longer actually true. I think it's actually makes good business sense to invest in green initiatives, and we finally come around to that. So if you do it, you're either sort of doing it for your children and grandchildren, and it's the right thing to do because the scientists say so, or on the other hand, you make money. Either way, you should do it, and it works out.
Awesome. Thanks, Elliot. Let us examine our third mega trend now. It's the increasingly decentralized tech landscape. So we are moving towards a hybrid world where physical and digital spaces are blending and converging, catalyzed, of course, by the COVID pandemic. The next generation of employees and wealth stewards are increasingly comfortable with and integrated into this new technological reality and do not distinguish between binary physical and digital worlds. This brings new values to workplaces, media, consumer practices, finance, healthcare, and governance. Liza, what are emerging investment opportunities for family offices and other allocators of capital that align with this hybrid reality I just described?
I mean, I think there isn't a day where we're hearing more and more about different types of AI-assisted solutions, and whether it helps you with writing essays and doing exams, and or helping you create new artwork and so forth. I have a pretty sort of hard stance on some of the kind of, you could say, trendier tech that comes, and we see them in waves, of course, right? I would say, first and foremost, my recommendation is really to cut through that noise. You really have to understand, what is this technology actually doing, for whom and how, who will be the beneficiary, and will there be any blind spots or unintended consequences? Because I think we really kind of drive ourselves to look for shortcuts, but oftentimes we don't think of how the implications will actually play out for people. So of course, we're living in a more digitally enhanced world, but that also means that we are going to be excluding some people. And are these technologies actually designed to be inclusive from the start? So we have to also question the biases. I know you're asking me about opportunities. I'm clearly sort of like reframing like how we pose the opportunity, because of course there is some questions that we have to challenge ourselves with when we get excited about things that we get really that kind of win our hearts and so forth. To be really, really tangible, and actually to bring it back to sort of, the excitement of AI and where I see there being benefits, but also sort of like really making it plain and simple. There's a solution that I've seen that's called FoldScope. I don't know if you can see this. So this is a paper microscope that allows individuals all over the world to have the same means of using lab equipment like microscopes, which can be very costly and frankly inaccessible for many people around the world. But 1.8 million of these already distributed around the world within 5 years. And what that actually means is that allowing kids, but also people who are curious, to get the same access to scientific equipment to actually do more citizen-led science. Now, there is intrinsically like something that could be really exciting if you add that AI level. If you apply a technology like this, which is low cost in its nature, to a real case. So, for instance, we want to source all the data that we can find about topsoil degradation all over the world. How do we use the power of community and accessible tools like this to get the data sets that are needed for the AI to crunch through? So we can't think about the technology itself. We actually have to think, how can that technology be used in ways that are actually going to be beneficial for the world? So it's just to kind of reframe the question. I get excited when I see technologies being used for good, whether applied to real life cases and not just the technology in itself, because I think it needs to be contextualized. Absolutely.
And are there specific strategies for, I guess, cutting through that AI noise that maybe you could share with our audience?
I think, to reiterate, it's just questioning the how and the who and the why, and 10 years from now, will we be talking about that technology? Will we still be excited? And if so, what are the consequences? Will there be a vast repository of waste that we have to deal with, and that suddenly becomes our problem? So I think just be critical, have the critical optic in place when you're thinking about things that are exciting. And of course, it's easy to get really excited, but just be mindful and challenge it a little bit and think, okay, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what will the world look like with that technology? Will I still be excited?
I love it. On to our fourth and final megatrend for today's webinar, a new or revised set of values. So we are seeing the consolidation or coalescence of a new set of values that recognize the importance and the interconnectedness of physical health and mental well-being. And there's a broader acceptance of neurodiversity, new family structures, new ways of parenting. Diversity and inclusion will remain at the center of public conversation, advertising, and politics. However, these changes will continue to bring clashes between various parties. But how do you go about advising your clients? How does it work to create a purpose or values-driven wealth? And what's your process that maybe our audience today could apply to their own wealth planning?
Yes. Back to what Liza was saying, which I think it might help. What I help, again, I help them understanding their values, right? And when I hear people saying venture capital is risky, I need to understand how come, like why is that risky for that individual? Because I only work with first generation, which I think it makes it easier, my work with them, because there's not all the responsibility and legacy. And I've chosen to work for them, to serve them, because I'm a first generation too, so I can relate better. But the thing is, we didn't have this financial wealth 10, 15 years ago, so suddenly we become over responsible for everyone that we need to provide, for everyone that still doesn't even exist, but we're already thinking about them. And so it's like, wait, like there's just so much good we can do. Meanwhile, if we detach by just channeling this money for causes that you truly care about. So that's how we work. Like we really need to ground them that it's about this lifetime, and hopefully your legacy will live way longer than yourself because you detached from all these responsibilities and from money itself, and you've channeled, So that's how we work with them. And understanding, like the first question for any process that people can try at home, that can guide their financial wealth planning, is first understanding, like, what does wealth mean to you? So what does it mean to you, and what positive legacy you want to leave behind, and in what timeline, because with those questions answered, then you can go through your causes. Again, I do love, because I'm not a big fan of ESG. I think it's needed, but I don't like as a guideline. I do love SDGs because they're very tangible, like and you don't need to go on the way it is splitted. You can then evolve. Like you just use really as a guideline, and I'm like, okay, these are very important causes. This is what's happening, but there are technologies that wouldn't fit at SDG on the way they created, but you can still like make it work on your wealth creation. So that's how we do. And then we create what I call a wealth map, because checking from time to with all your financial assets, right, and your true wealth goals. So we do use a tool I can then share with you guys, and they can share with the audience, which is like the wheels of life, like 7 different wheels, like financial being only one of them. But we add that to their wealth map, so they don't get lost, because from time to time people do get anxious about their financial wealth, and then you need to come and just show very in a very analytical and pragmatic way, this is all you have, this is what we agreed that you wanted. We can adapt, we can, like, of course, change if things have changed, but just remember what you really want to do, what you really want to give or like invest in on. So it helps them a lot. But it's like a very consistent type of work, and I think that's for all of us, because even if come from generation or if it's our own financial wealth, from time to time, and especially when it's times of recession and scarcity, you hear so many negativity that you start getting anxious, like, do I have enough? Like, what's happening? Like, how can I? So it's really about always grounding yourself and going to the pragmatical side of things, which are numbers and your true like goals, and then you can like truly strategize. So that's how we do.
And I think what you're describing is part of a broader sort of general theme that at least I've been observing within the family office community. There is a real appetite for a broadening of the definition of capital, right? So we're not just talking about financial capital, we're talking about intellectual, spiritual, human, emotional, and social. And I think that's something that the next generation is getting really excited about. We've got a question from the audience for you, Bar, that ties in nicely here. How can Gen Z influence the family office industry?
Massively. The fun part of this new generation getting financially wealthy so early, it's very interesting because they are still teenagers, so it's very easy for them to care, genuinely care. So when you, like, I have like my onboarding process with family members, it takes around like 3 to 5 hours, a lot of questions, just like getting to learn more about them and the values, like all those things. And doing with anyone that is between 12 years old to 20, it's the best experience ever, because they have the means, they care a lot, they haven't asked themselves a lot of those questions, but they already know their causes, and as they're answering, they feel very excited about what they can do, and they have like benchmarks of like, who do you look up to, and they're normally like people who they should be looking up to, so it's really exciting to see that. And they're connected, like they know they can help changing behaviors, they know they can be like a real force of change, like Elliot said about Greta. Like, that's a massive influence, that triggers all of us, doesn't matter the age, so they are aware of that. And because they do, like, a lot of them now have the financial wealth to be heard. It's not only their influence on social media, because there's also that, but they do have financial capital, and then people listen to them, like in this industry. So I think they have massive impact because they come differently and they come very early. And then the Gen Alpha, I think I'm a mom of a Gen Alpha, and I'm always thinking now, like, okay, how do we do this? Because even creating his portfolio on givings and investing, like, does this really make sense for what he will be excited about, or am I just putting my value there and not doing it properly? So it's a very interesting exercise, and I'm lucky to be a mom now, because otherwise I would miss this connection with the new generation. Even the way they connect with iPhones, like, he's 1 year old, he gets my iPhone, like, and talks to his grandma. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that's weird. So it's these things that we need to be in tune, because it is changing very quickly,
And I think it's important
for good, for bad.
Of course, I think it's important to recognize the next generation do want to continue the legacy of their family and grow wealth, but they want to do it in their own way. So I think you're really creating the environment, designing the context for that to happen really effectively. So love your work on that. I'd like to round off our conversation by opening up the floor and just ask what you guys are focusing on this year and what you think should be top of mind for family offices. Elliot, let's start with you.
Well, I think this conversation of values is very important and very timely, and I think it's only going to continue and accelerate. I think this new generation of business owners and family members who are, coming into that age where you're either taking over the business or taking over direction of the family office or whatever the case is, and as Bob mentioned, this whole new generation of individuals, all of that coming together, I mean, really, over the next, I would imagine, sort of 5, 10, 15 years, is a fascinating time in this space. And I think it's a very worthwhile conversation to be having. And I think, my view would be to have those conversations and to really drive deep into them, because until you've sort of really landed them, can you really be making those investment decisions and directions sort of, in the best interests of yourself and true to yourself and your family? So I think that's sort of what's most interesting for me. And then in this space, and then sort of, just generally for myself, as I kind of transition from Canada to Copenhagen, and learning a little bit more, I'm sort of curious about the culture here, curious about Scandinavia, reconnecting with Europe in many ways, and continuing to try to guide some clients through these tumultuous times, and maybe continue to help some new ones as well.
Awesome. Liza, your thoughts on the same question?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I think, just in terms of top of mind, we're living in times of limits, right? So, and of course, what Bar mentioned earlier in terms of sort of, when there's times of crisis, we start sort of, really reflecting on what things mean for us, what wealth actually means. I think for me, it's very much what does it mean, and to what extent can we thrive within the limits that we have, right? So, and I think, you know, even taking that on a really metaphorical level, you know, we have the limits that we have, and we need to be able to live within our means. And I think, you know, I'm really craving leadership in these times as well, where, of course, no one has the answer. It is going to be difficult. It's all very uncertain. The change is constant. That's one thing that we can be sure of. But we just have to be ready to adapt. It's a little bit like your journey and your adventure, Elliot. You know, you're adapting to a new environment, and you kind of have to learn about yourself in this new environment, new surroundings. And it's only through that learning process will you grow. So I think actually, you know, for me, it's trying to simplify. I love that this is a simple community. I think, how do we live in a simple way, remove some of the complexity, and just stop trying to overthink and feel that we need to be in constant control. We just have to let go and let ourselves, you know, rumble with the sadness, the fear, the anxiety, and that is what it is to be human. So I think, yeah, a long-winded way of saying, yeah, I think, you know, an exercise of living within limits and just learning, deep listening.
And I like what you said, Liza, about emphasizing the human, right? Because a big part of the family office community is family, and what makes up families is humans. So I think the more that we can do to put humans at the center of all that we do without losing sight of that is a really effective strategy moving into the new year. Bart, your thoughts about what you're excited about this year, what you're working on, and maybe even you know, key questions you ask of your clients to kick off the, you know, restructuring of their portfolios for this year or even in the years ahead.
Yeah, so I'm excited about doing things slower in every sense, you know, like I think these times allow us to make the wealth holders to breathe and to rethink, but in a very needed way, because if there's all the buzz and they're in a rush in other times, now they're really like, there's fear, but there's a good fear in this type of industry, because like, okay, let's think wisely, right? And I think the question I do make that I didn't mention on the when I was talking about the key questions is, how much is enough? And that's like the questions they never know the answer, and that I need to ask very, very often, because we get to a number and it's never about the number, you know, and they keep building more financial wealth, and little by little, yes, it's getting truly aligned on everything they do. But this is the time to like, okay, how much is enough and why? And as you answer, you know you can rechannel better. So massive opportunities in VC, massive opportunities even in the public market, you know, and massive like real estate farmers. Like there's just so many opportunities right now. You just need to, again, do very slowly, very diligently, a lot of discipline. Like it's so, like if you love doing this, you know, if you love channeling your money for good stuff, like spend time analyzing the investment, like spend time with the founders, or spend time with your family office, truly understanding what you're doing, because that's what matters. It's not, in the end of the day, will never be the returns, but what you were truly like making with your money to do it better. And the more involved you get, more joyful it gets. So that would be my strategy. And again, charitable giving. Like it's time. Like there's so much capital being like sitting on donor advised funds, you know, on not being truly deployed, no time to strategize that deployment specifically, you know. So this year, next year, because I think it's a 2 years that we will do things slowly and very thoughtfully. So even for my peers at the family office industry, they're like, please make time for the donations, make time to strategize that part of the portfolio, because you probably left on hold for more than a decade sometimes, so I think that's a good use of our time.
And I think that's a strategic gift giving and philanthropy is, a big focus area that Simple will be examining in 2023. And I think it's so much more than just writing a check to get a sort of tax benefit. There's really a huge untapped opportunity to drive impact through very thoughtful and strategic giving. So really looking forward to diving into that at another time. Francois, would you like to maybe share a little bit about what's on the cards for Simple in the year ahead and what's exciting us?
Yeah, for sure. It's super interesting to hear everyone's kind of comments relating around this idea of simplification. And I think that's been core to our brand always, is this idea of simplification. And we're going into a space where there's a lot more complexity. So figuring out how we can both broaden our coverage at Simple, plus going deeper into some topics while simplifying these, I think that's going to be our key challenge this year. And why do we want this to be simple? At the end of the day, there's this concept about simple ideas, and simple ideas are easily understood, and ideas that are easily understood spread, and ideas that spread have the power to change the world. So that's kind of the bottom line here, is remove that complexity, make things in the finance and the banking space and the family office space, make that more simple. And in doing so, just opening up those doors and the spaces to more partners and bright people out there to join us on this journey. So that's kind of what we're focusing on, Simple, in various different ways, and we're looking forward to sharing some of that with you throughout this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Francois. And thank you to our panelists, Bar, Elliot, and Liza, for sharing your invaluable perspectives and insight with our audience today. It's been a pleasure. Jess, back to you.
Thanks, Simon. And thank you to you, Bar, Liza, Elliot, and Francois, for such an insightful discussion and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us so generously. If anyone listening in would like to get in touch with our panelists, you can do so via LinkedIn or via contacting the Simple team. We also extend this to anyone interested in the topic of foresight. We would be happy to connect you with the foresight practitioners that we collaborate with. I would also like to thank everyone watching today. We are so proud of this incredible network, and we're excited to see it continue to grow and become even more dynamic. This recording will be available to watch right here on our LinkedIn page or via the Simple platform, as well as on YouTube. And this webinar forms part of an ongoing series where we find new ways to shed light and increase transparency into the family office industry. So keep watching this space to see what topics we tackle next, in discussion with more brilliant minds such as these. If you have any thoughts or ideas for future webinars, or if you would like to learn more about the work that we do at Simple, please don't hesitate to reach out, either via mail or here in the comment section. We welcome any and all feedback. So once again, a huge thank you to everyone who made today possible. We hope to see you at the next webinar. Bye for now.